Hello and welcome to The Nexus. Today's show, we're looking at the BritPac, the British Pakistanis reaching the very top of the political ladder. We're looking at two prominent men in particular. Now, Sajid Javid is one of the most powerful members of the cabinet and is now tipped to be the next British Prime Minister. And Sadiq Khan, the mayor of Europe's biggest city, London, is now preparing to fight for a second term. Both men are from humble beginnings, sons of Pakistani bus drivers. Yet so many of their fellow BritPacs can't stand them. Why? Well, all that and more coming up right now, right here in The Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in The Nexus, could Britain be about to get its first Muslim Prime Minister? Sajid Javid is currently the bookies' favourite to take over if Mrs May's government collapses. We'll discuss all this with our illustrious panel in just a moment. But first, let's look at his incredibly swift rise from bus driver's son to leader-in-waiting.
We shall fight on the beaches and in the streets. We shall never surrender.
The venerable Winston Churchill once voted the greatest Briton of all time. But before we knew him as the Prime Minister that led the country to victory over Nazi Germany, he occupied the post of Home Secretary, as did Britain's current Prime Minister, Theresa May. Home Secretary is one of the great four offices of state, along with the Foreign Secretary, Finance Minister, and of course the Prime Minister. And in the entire history of the post, which has spanned some 2.5 centuries, the occupants have always been white. Until now. Sajid Javid is a British Pakistani, his parents arriving in the United Kingdom in the 1960s. They were just some of the thousands that would do so over the decades to follow. Now Britain is home to nearly 1.2 million people of Pakistani origin. And it's all down to Britain's historic Commonwealth links with Pakistan. Following the Second World War, Britain needed labour, and Pakistanis belonging to the Commonwealth found it relatively easy in the 1950s and 60s to move to the UK, taking jobs in the British steel, textile and engineering industries.
The vast majority of them willing to take on the heavier and dirtier jobs and prepared to work on the overnight shift.
But Sajid Javid's father tried something else. He became a bus driver and then opened up a little corner shop on one of Britain's most dangerous streets in the city of Bristol. And Sajid was not really expected to do much more. In fact, his career advisor at school told him he'd make a good TV repairman. But he went to university and then straight into banking, eventually going on to become a board member at Deutsche Bank. By 2004, he was flying high, earning in excess of $3 million a year. After making his fortune, he turned his hand to politics, elected as a Conservative MP in 2010. Within just a few short years, he became Britain's first Home Secretary with Muslim heritage. And like all politicians, he's had to get used to a lot of public scrutiny. And some of his harshest critics have been from within the Pakistani community. But despite all of that, the boy who grew up on one of the country's worst streets could soon be taking up residence in one of its most salubrious, as Sajid Javid is now the odds-on favourite to be the next Prime Minister of Britain. Let's go to Andre Walker now. He regularly telephones Tory MPs to find out what's going on in that organisation. Andre, I need to know, what is Sajid's secret? He's only been in politics a few years and look where he's got to.
Yeah, I think Sajid's secret is that he's a die-in-the-wall Conservative. It's very often said that it's important what your background is, but actually I think the Conservatives are not so interested in background. What they're interested in is your political views and your ability to do the job. I mean, this is a guy who has risen up in banking. Obviously, the financial sector, you see some of it behind me, is hugely significant for the United Kingdom. Yeah. And to have someone who's a big player in that, I think for many Conservative MPs, is far more important relevant than whether he is or he is not a Muslim, or whether he is or is not a Pakistani.
Fair point. I've got this nice little cartoon from The Economist, actually, which demonstrates... Look at him there. He's going into the Home Office with a broom, and he's cleaning up because it's a bit of a mess there. We'll get into that later. And there up on the wall is a nice portrait of Margaret Thatcher. You said he's a dyed-in-the-wool Conservative. The thing is, the Conservative Party, for the broader audience, it's a bit like the Republicans, isn't it? It's perhaps not the first place you'd consider that would put forward someone from an ethnic minority in such a senior position. What's happened?
Well, you say that, but of course Benjamin Disraeli was a Jewish Prime Minister, and we've had 2 women Prime Ministers.
Yeah.
So every other political party has only ever produced white Christian men, whereas the Conservatives have done something slightly different. And the reason for that is they're not interested in positive discrimination. They're interested in really where you're going to, not necessarily where you're coming from. Obviously, the Pakistani community is hugely significant for the United Kingdom, but I think what's more significant is individual opportunities presented to people like Sajid Javid and the payback that we get as British taxpayers for having someone of that quality in the government.
Well, let's go over to Mohammed Amin now. Mohammed, you're a part of the Conservative establishment, so to speak. What does it tell us about the party that Sajid Javid is now the Home Secretary?
Exactly what Andre has just said. The Conservative Party has a long history of judging individuals on individual merit. It sees society as made up of individuals, not as made up of groups. It doesn't care what Sajid's background is. It cares what his talents are and what he believes and what he stands for.
Well, his talents have been, so far, making an awful lot of money for himself.
That's a good sign of ability.
That's classic Conservative angle. Let's go to Imran Shah. Imran, I know that you're not the greatest fan of this gentleman. We'll get to that in a moment. But let me ask you, what does it tell us about the country as a whole, Britain, that someone like Sajid Javid could get to such a top spot?
I think we have to understand that there is a contrast in the way in which party politics is playing and the way that what's happening on the ground. So you have someone who is, in a sense, the 2 guests are right. The Conservative Party don't care where you come from. They only care whether you actually align to their values or not. And that's really dangerous because it makes a party really insular. The majority of British Asians are actually really working class. Yes, there is a burgeoning middle class, but really the working class...
Does that mean they're more in favour of the Labour Party?
Yes, naturally so. And when they see someone like Sajid Javid, who doesn't really display much of his identity, remember, parties get people of different minorities to represent themselves and to represent the diversity within the inclusive values.
You're saying basically that the Conservative Party is using him as a sort of a Trojan horse to get... well, hang on, let's talk about the other prominent gentleman in this story. We have Sadiq Khan. Now, Sadiq Khan is from the Labour Party, which, as Imran said, tends to have more popularity amongst British Asians. Let's take a look at his profile. So there he is, Sadiq Khan, 47 years old, member of the Labour Party, married with 2 children, Mayor of London since 2016, and says he will seek re-election in 2020. Imran Shah, do you find Sadiq Khan's rise through the ranks, now Mayor of London, to be a positive sign about Britain's ability to give everyone a fair crack of the whip?
For someone like Sadiq, who is, it's natural for him as a Labour politician to be proud of his working class roots, to be proud as an ethnic minority, as a British Asian.
Right.
Yes, that comes through in his role.
But what I'm saying is, what does it tell us about Britain? Or if not Britain, London, then?
There is a sense now, with the increase in poverty in London, that they went on to elect a Labour person. That is clear in the way that Sadiq is playing good politics with his identity, which he should do. And we don't see that from Sajid Javid at all. He gets more respect from wealthy British Asians and from the wealthy elite in general.
Let's take a quick look at the demographics of London here. Let's have a peep at the graphic. You can see that the majority are still white, Asian British, they're 18.4%, Pakistani around 2.7%. Let me ask you basically about the changing demographics, Imran, of the capital. Do you think that this means that it's much more likely an ethnic minority person like Sadiq Khan will be elected in the future?
Of course. I mean, you have an increasing diverse city. It's open, it's very inclusive. I mean, we know that it voted highly Remain. in the Brexit, and that tends to be the case in places like Manchester and so on. So where you see cities in the UK, they're much more diverse, much more welcoming to immigrants, and much more welcoming to ethnic minorities.
Do you think Britain's a good country to give people the opportunity to make of themselves what they will?
I think there are still a lot of barriers. There's increasing more barriers when you have like the way in which inequality is going in this country. It is increasing more barriers, not so much on religious and racial lines, but on class lines as well. And I think really in terms of the UK, it's going in the wrong direction since we've had that.
Andre, what do you think? I mean, I imagine all countries pose their difficulties, but it seems to me, on the two gentlemen's record, that it allows you to fulfil your dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. And Britain is one of the least racist countries in the world. And our ability to integrate with people from all around the world, I think, is legendary. It's also often said that London is not like the rest of England. I think that is true. I often say the United Kingdom, we're inherently a fairly poor country that owns the capital of the world. So obviously it's going to be much more of a melting pot in London than it is in the rest of the United Kingdom. But nonetheless, as I say, Sajid Javid's background is very typical of a Conservative if he were white and Christian.
Well, that's because he loves money. Andre, thank you for that.
Get out of it.
Well,
Get out of it.
There's no shortage of journalists like Andre, politicians and commentators applauding these two men for reaching high office, yet many people who share their background are less than impressed. Here's what we found on the streets of East London, and a warning, you may find some of the language in the report a bit, well, it depends on your point of view, really.
I declare Sadiq Khan the new Mayor of London.
My name is Sadiq Khan and I'm the Mayor of London.
A man of Pakistani origin has been appointed the new Home Secretary. Sajid Javid, the son of Pakistani immigrants to Britain.
Two British Pakistani Muslims. Both claim to come from humble beginnings. Both have reached high-profile political positions. But how representative are both Sajid Javid and Sadiq Khan of their communities? They've used the labels of Pakistani and Muslim in a political context, but what do Pakistani Muslims think of them and their politics?
Call a spade, isn't it? Basically, it's as simple as that. It's either everyone's feeling you, and we like you, you represent us, or it's either you're not.
People that welcome my appointment by calling me a coconut and an Uncle Tom. And if that's something the Leader of the Opposition thinks is wrong, why doesn't he get up in the dispatch box right now and denounce them?
What's a coconut or an Uncle Tom? Well, some people see the terms as racist, offensive ones, whilst others use them as political terms to describe an ethnic minority. A coconut is seen as someone that's brown on the outside and white on the inside, whilst the Uncle Tom is seen as someone that's subservient to their white masters or white establishment, a throwback to times of slavery.
Some feel that Sadiq Khan's presence at the London Gay Pride March compromised his identity.
Whether he represents us as a mayor in London, I think, yeah, it's possible. But all the issues, you have to leave the Pakistani values, the Pakistani culture aside.
That's pretty harsh on Sadiq Khan. So what do they think of Sajid Javid? Like, you know, he's
a coconut. Exactly that. A house Muslim. Yeah. And Uncle Tom.
In the past, Sajid Javid has said that he's a non-practicing Muslim. But he has used his Muslim identity in politics.
There is a simmering anti-Muslim underbelly of Islamophobia within the party. Do you agree with that?
I do not agree with that. As you just described me, my name is Sajid Javid. I'm the Home Secretary.
With over 1 million Pakistanis living in Britain, is it realistic to expect two men to represent the opinions, views and values of all of them?
Well, I warned you about the language, didn't I? Mohammed Amin, if I could come to you first of all. When you hear those sort of expressions, coconut and the other one, do you find them offensive and rude?
I think some people of Pakistani origin have trouble coping with people who don't have their entire identity entirely defined by their Pakistaniness. So if you work in an organization which is mostly white, like an international accounting firm, if you go to a posh university like Cambridge, many people resent that. If you wear Western clothes all the time, if you read Western literature rather than entirely listening to Asian music, they feel that somehow you're betraying them.
What do you think about that, Imran Shah? The idea of a coconut, it seems Mohammed's just dismantled it quite eloquently, really.
I mean, there is a small element of that, but really we have to understand that coconut is a political term. I think it was broken down in your program that it's a way of power play on a racial divide. So you get someone who looks like the people that you're trying to discriminate, and there is periods of that. It's not just Asians that have a problem with that; it's also black people, and there is an issue with that within the British establishment, which is, it kind of goes back to the two figures that we're talking about, and when you see how one visibly tries to represent their background more than the other, that's when you can distinguish
who do you think fits that moniker, that label of coconut more?
Definitely Sajid Javid, and I think that's generally a popular view.
But why?
And again, it's not just because of the policies that he's done. So he's vehemently pro-Israeli. He's vehemently like when there was issues of Islamophobia in the being raised up in the Tory party, he defended that. When other Muslim politicians in the party was raising it, he actually said, no, they're wrong, and there's no problem with the party. Which, you could argue he has to use a party position, but if he's really going to put his party above his own people, then that's
Mohammed, just quick,
hang on a second.
Andre, come in. I mean, he was talking about defending the party that he belongs to as not having a problem with Islamophobia. Does it?
Hang on a second. Look, what is incredible here is that the people who are complaining about racism, i.e. the political left, are arguing that Sajid Javid shouldn't be a government minister on the grounds he's not Pakistani enough. Yet the two guys that you've invited on the programme who are from the political right are saying, bring it on, isn't this absolutely fantastic? Look, this guy doesn't have a duty to behave in a certain way. This is an individual in a free country who can behave whatever way he likes. And I think that what we don't want to do with immigrant communities is constantly say to them, you're not black enough, you're not Asian enough, you're not Chinese enough, and then complain that these people don't rise to power and say that it's racism on behalf of people like me. I think actually the truth of the matter is that there is a racism on the other side which says that if you're a conservative, you cannot be involved in politics if you're not white. And the people who are saying that, bear in mind, are the people on the political left, not people like me.
The thing is, Andre, Imran mentioned Sajid Javid's strong support for Israel. We have a graphic here, quote from him, in which he says, let's have a look, the only nation in the Middle East that shares the same democratic values as Britain, and the only nation in the Middle East where my family would feel the warm embrace of freedom and liberty. I don't have to tell you that a lot of Muslims find what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank an absolute affront to democracy and liberty.
Listen, the vast majority of Muslims who vote Conservative believe in a two-state solution, just like the British government, just like the Palestinian authorities, and just like the majority of people in Israel in general. The idea that you need to support the wiping of Israel off the face of the earth in order to be a Muslim is patent nonsense. This is just something that obsessive left-wing lunatics believe. The rest of us think it's rubbish.
Well, I think it's probably quite a widely held opinion amongst Muslims. But Imran, let me come back to you for a second.
Let's be clear. Wiping Israel out off the face of the map is not a widespread view.
But that's not the alternative.
A two-state solution
no, Andre,
is the widespread popular view.
That's not the alternative, is it? They're looking for fairness, for people who are living in Gaza and the West Bank. Well, let's look at another particular sore point with some Muslims, anyway, when they talk about Sajid Javid. We have a picture of him having a drink. We've had to pixelate out the offending drink, but the point is that is not typical practicing Muslim behaviour. And the thing is, Imran, is that he says, I will define how I am. I'm not going to be defined by others. And Andre Walker mentioned that point as well. Isn't that fair? He wants to be who he is and not have it prescribed by the wider Pakistani British community.
Yeah, I mean, whether he's choosing to be Muslim or not is not the problem. It's when he votes for policies inside Parliament that actually harm his community or not. So when you look at some of the policies that he's voted for, whether it's the housing benefit, when it's the various different sort of issues when it comes to poverty.
Okay.
When you look at his role now in the Windrush scandal, he's actually not made it better. He's just tried to cover it up.
Right, that's just for our viewers, the Windrush scandal is the immigration scandal that affected the West Indians who came here in the 50s and 60s. And he says he's actually improving the situation. You say it's just cosmetic. Let me ask you then about Sadiq Khan, because whilst Pakistani Muslims that I've spoken to anecdotally they are much more fond of him, he also has the obligation to represent all of London. I've got some pictures here of Sadiq Khan attending a gay pride march in London, and he's embracing the people there. And he seems to be participating fully, and those people belong to London too, so he's got to represent them. Tell me honestly, do Pakistani British people have a problem with him attending a gay pride march?
Some do, but majority of people do not. They understand that a London mayor needs to represent everybody, and therefore he must be judged upon his effectiveness to represent the city. And
would people genuinely prefer a mayor who takes a moral stand against, say, for example, gay pride march and say, no, sorry, I won't attend. It doesn't conform with my ethics and morals?
Well, the thing is that when it comes to, like, let me give you a clear example. When Trump was attacking Sadiq Khan, Sadiq Khan didn't shy from his identity. He attacked back. When it came to standing up for Muslim or ethnic minorities from Sajid Javid's role, that didn't happen. He welcomed the sort of discrimination and the race laws and all the sort of things that he voted for.
Well, the old chestnut is, are you more British or are you more Pakistani? And it sort of comes out sometimes. Here's an interesting little soundbite from when Sadiq Khan went to Pakistan.
Does it feel like coming home?
Home South London, mate. But you know, it's good to be in Pakistan. It's good to come from India, home of my parents and grandparents, and obviously there's an emotional connection for me, bearing in mind my connections to this great part of the world.
Let's pick that up with Imran. Imran, that was something that irritated a lot of people that I know, British Pakistanis that I know. Did you find it irritating when the journalist asked him, what's it like to be coming home?
You want to make sure as a politician that your actions reinforce the image and the rhetoric that you're saying. Otherwise, people will just, call you a hypocrite. And that's kind of what's happening. They're not seeing the same sort of actions that are benefiting British Pakistanis here or abroad, or even British Muslims for that matter.
But why are they asking him if he's happy to be home in Pakistan when he says, look, mate, South London's my home?
As a British Pakistani, you have to be comfortable with both identities. If you're going to rescind one identity for the other, then you don't fit that demographic anymore, and you don't identify with those type of people anymore, and that's the problem. That's what's happening.
So you're saying they both sort of sold their identities down the river to get political office. Well, what do you think, Andre?
Yes,
you wanted to come in here?
Yeah, if you're going to, sorry, not you individually, but if one is going to moan that these people are not being Pakistani enough, then that is what will lead to people asking the question, is Pakistan really your home? Actually, the truth of the matter is, when you talk about people being Uncle Toms or whatever, if you look at these guys, what is Sadiq Khan? He's the Mayor of London. What is Sajid Javid? He's the Home Secretary. These people are not principally Pakistani Muslims. They're not principally Londoners. They're not principally from Bromsgrove. They're principally senior politicians in Britain, and their first duty is the people who elect them.
There's a lot of principled British Pakistanis who would put their religion first, to then Pakistan, and then their family.
Well, let me just say this to you:
and that's just the way it is.
If you believe you become a better Home Secretary by never drinking alcohol, then actually you're just completely mad, because it's a totally irrelevant issue.
Maybe they think it makes them a better person, Andre. But look, let's pick it up a little bit. There are some really good benefits to having this sort of dual identity. First of all, let's just get a few basic facts here. We're around about 1.17 million British Pakistanis living in Britain. And take a look. Remittances, that's payments from the UK to Pakistan, around $1.8 billion in 2015-2016. And if you look how the money is going back to Pakistan, where the average minimum wage in full-time employment per month is $121 compared to $1,600 in the United Kingdom. Let me ask you, Imran, you were talking about how money gets sent back to Pakistan and it's used very wisely to make some really incredible homes and to help the wider family out.
Yeah, I mean, we're still dealing with a demographic that has close cultural and family ties back home.
Yeah.
And so you do have a sense of belonging with people who are part of a wider family unit, that as opposed to simply nation states. And that's the case when it comes to generally Pakistanis in general. So and what you have to understand about the Pakistani mindset is that they're far more entrepreneurial in understanding how to deal with different changes. positive and negative, and how to leverage them for their own benefit.
Well, as a number of people have alluded to in the show, Sajid Javid's great hero is Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher. And in fact, he would describe himself perhaps more as a Thatcherite than as a Conservative. There's also somebody else that he is politically in love with, Mohammed, and that is Ayn Rand. Can you tell me any more about how she's influenced him?
Ayn Rand is a very famous libertarian, wrote 2 books, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. I haven't read either of them, although I own copies of both.
Yeah.
And I've been to Ayn Rand lectures. They're extremely libertarian.
Apparently he reads The Fountainhead, Ayn Rand's book, twice a year, probably to remind himself about how the individual can bend the arc of history.
Well, to be precise, he reads one particular chapter from The Fountainhead every year rather than the whole book.
Oh, I beg your
It's
pardon.
a great film.
Please, great film. Well, I'll watch it if it's a film, but I'm not going to open a book for anyone. Mohammed Amin, thank you so much for your help today. Andre Walker, as ever, and also Imran Shah, thank you very much. And thank you at home for watching. As always, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch this episode and all the previous episodes. But for now, that is all. Thank you and see you next week.